everybody, and welcome to the Feminine Principle Podcast, Astrology for Authentic Living. My name is Mel with Energetic Principles.
And I'm Shawna with Neo-Feminine Astrology.
And in this episode, we will be discussing the astrology for the week of December 4th and what we have titled, Stay on Your Game. The purpose of this podcast is to give inspiration and guidance for this week with real-life examples of what to expect.
The three major aspects that we'll talk about today are Mars in Libra, sextile Saturn, which is all about applied effort. We'll also talk about Mercury in Sagittarius, conjunct Saturn, sextile Mars, and trine Uranus, which is called appropriately, I Need a Moment.
I know. I need a moment just for that.
Yes. And then after we have our moments, we'll talk about Venus square Neptune and the last quarter moon in Virgo, which is about conflicting values. So please remember that some of these aspects will influence you more than others based on what's literally happening in your life right now and your personal astrological makeup. So notice what resonates with you most and always use your intuition and logic to decide what's best for you.
Yes, because you know you best. So yeah, Shawna, let's kick off the week's episode with a quick rundown of the moon's path through the zodiac and some other minor aspects for all you astro geeks out there. Well, our lunar lady, also known as the moon, is currently in her waxing cycle as she starts the week off. Oh, excuse me, she's waning. She's waning now, isn't she?
Waning, yes.
That's what happens with the moon. And this is a good moon lesson, actually, is the moon is always in fluctuation. So now she is waning. And she starts off the week by squeaking out a Gemini and into sensitive Cancer early on Monday. She's going to remain there until moving into loving Leo on Wednesday. And then we're going to kick off the weekend with her move into discerning Virgo on Friday as she makes her way to her last quarter moon position on Saturday, which is Sunday for some, depending on where you live. We're going to talk about that much more later in this episode. So also note we have Mars, who is moving into Scorpio on Saturday, December 9th at 1 a.m. Pacific time, which is 9 a.m. Universal Time and 7 p.m. Aussie Eastern Time. So Shawna, please share with us who we are featuring for this week's quotes.
So this episode features quotes and inspiration from the life coach and speaker, Marie Forleo. So we're featuring Marie this week because she's one of my favorite Sagittarius people. We're officially in Sagittarius season. And she's a great symbol for this week because of her inspiration, her passion, and her focus. So excited to feature her this week.
Yes, I love the quote. Obviously I've previewed them and they're wonderful. She's a great feature. Good work, Shawna.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're excited to jump into these transits. One last note before we do, a shout out to our new patrons, Sienna and Believe Hope 27. Thank you so much.
Yes, we're very much appreciative of your generosity. And also shout out to Sienna for the lovely and very enthusiastic comment she left on our patron page. We definitely appreciate the encouragement from all our patrons. We're so appreciative.
Yes, yeah, definitely. We appreciate the support from all of our patrons. And if you want to be cool like our patrons, you can become a patron of the podcast. And when you do, you get the show notes that we provide every single week with all of the details of each episode. And that includes the specific dates of the transits that we talk about, the tarot cards that Mel pulls, the quotes that I select, the reflection questions, and the weekly action item. Oh my gosh. All of it. So basically you get all the amazing things. So you can become a patron of the podcast by going to feminineprinciplepodcast.podbean.com. You can also just find out more about us and connect with us on our Facebook and Instagram page under Feminine Principle Podcast.
Yes. And all that information to become a patron or to do anything relating to us will be there. And just a quick note, because it's so fresh and so new, we don't forget, Shawna, we have our Astro Basics cheat sheet that also comes with patronage now. So if you sign up at the $5 tier or more, not only do you get the show notes, but we have a fun little cheat sheet we put together so that you can follow along with some of the astrologies that happens when we talk. So it helps with people that don't know as much about astrology. So that might be a perk as well.
Definitely.
And just a quick note before we get started, just a reminder about our Facebook Live replay from last week's full moon fever. We have that on our Facebook page that Shawna was just mentioning earlier. So if you want to check that out, it is there. So yeah, Shawna, should we get started?
Yes, let's
get started. There's a lot to discuss. Okay. So our first transit, for this episode is actually going to be Mars in Libra, who is sextile to Saturn, and what we are titling applied effort. And that will be exact on Wednesday, December 6th at 1:21 p.m. Pacific time, which is 9:21 p.m. Universal Time, and Thursday the 7th at 7:21 a.m. Aussie Eastern Time. And that will happen at 28 degrees Libra and Sagittarius. So Shawna, kick us in with your first quote.
So this quote again is by Marie Forleo. She says, "Success doesn't come from what you do occasionally. It comes from what you do consistently." And so I thought this was perfect because Saturn is all about success. It's about achievement, and it's about persistence. And Mars is about doing things. So when these two come together, it's like, okay, what are we doing? And what are we doing consistently to move towards what it is that we want to become very successful at?
Yes. And I love this quote, Shawna. It is simple, yet so profound. Because it's true, if you are not applying effort towards something, but you want something to happen, how's it going to happen? So this is when Mars sextiles Saturn, we're allowing things to happen, or it's an opportunity to happen in one way or the other. But I find it interesting, Shawna, how, okay, of course, we're going to get into all the Mercury retrograde business about mid-episode here. But we have Mars, who will also be making contacts to Mercury. So I feel like there is a flavor of retrograde in this sextile. In other words, Mars is about doing. In Saturn, we have the applied effort and that discipline. But I'm wondering if there is an element that is having us rethink our own discipline and how we're going about things. Because we're in this Mercury retrograde cycle, and it's also talking to Mars. That might be a little early. I might be putting this too early in the episode. But what do you think about that, Shawna?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, and we can't really talk about this aspect without acknowledging that Mercury retrograde flavoring. Another piece of this that's interesting that we can talk about too is Mars is in the sign of Libra, and it's at the very tail end of Libra. So it's about 28 degrees when it makes this aspect. And Mars in Libra is notorious for actions being like for indecisive actions and like wanting to take action, but where we're like, do I really want to do that? We can see the many different pros and cons of different decisions. And so I think that adds another layer. Like we have the Mercury retrograde piece where we're thinking about our actions also that we'll talk about more. But even before we get to that, it's like, how do we want to act? And I wonder if because Mars is making this sextile to Saturn, maybe we're coming up towards resistance or maybe like a challenge, and we're like rethinking, okay, is this worth the effort? Do I want to do this? Or, do I want to redirect myself in some way?
Absolutely. I think that's a good way of looking at it, especially since we have Mars who is in its closing sextile. So this is like a 2+ year transit that Mars has done its dance with Saturn and applying our efforts in this, disciplined way. So it's kind of like not a last piece of a puzzle per se, but yeah, especially with the retrograde, I'm wondering if we're going to be reconsidering a lot of things that we are applying our effort to, essentially. And I'm also wondering if anything comes up this time, in pure Mercury retrograde form, delays are a thing of this period. So I'm wondering if anything has to come up with this sextile, if the delay will end up working in our favor, because sextiles are opportunity to act in some way, and maybe we won't be able to act, but that is actually the beauty of it, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, I would say don't freak out if we can't get the thing done that we want to get done. There's probably a reason that we're coming up against this limitation, or whether that is working through it or redirecting, that depends on the situation and the person. But I think it's a good time for for thinking about things and using discernment and trying to see the bigger picture as much as possible.
Yes, because Sagittarius is all about the bigger picture. And this, it's interesting because I always throw these on you, Shawna. I'm like, okay, when did Mars conjunct Saturn? We probably should have looked at that.
I've looked that up as we're talking, because I know.
Oh, yay! She's like, I can feel it. She's gonna ask me.
And I think we both love looking at, especially the conjunction, because that's the conjunction is the beginning of the cycle of this Mars and Saturn situation. So this Mars started this cycle with Saturn on April 2nd. Or wait, no, sorry. On August 24th, 2016.
And do you know the degree? Do you have the degree there?
9 degrees Sagittarius.
Oh, I just got chills in my body. That means a lot to me. I won't share it here, but that means a lot to me. It's so interesting, because what I was thinking, why I wanted to know that, is because Mars has been basically doing its cycle dance with Saturn for the majority of the time that Saturn has been in Sagittarius. So let me segue to why I'm even talking about this, because you just referenced, staying with this big picture. And that is essentially what Saturn has been doing this whole time in Sagittarius. And it's now wrapping up its time there, and we'll move into Capricorn in December. So I feel like, the whole time that Mars has been doing its dance while Saturn's been there. So it has been all about the big picture and how we assert ourselves and put our energy into these visions that we have to create almost this new story in our lives that has kind of been transmuting itself through Saturn and Sagittarius. So what do you think about that, Shawna?
Yeah, it does feel like this sense of processing all of the things that have happened while over the past 2.5 years or so, while Saturn has been in Sagittarius. And it is really interesting that Mars and Mercury are the last planets to make aspect with Saturn before it moves out.
Yes.
It's like Mars is the doing, the possibly like doing by getting closure, and then Mercury is like, okay, how do I actually feel about this? What am I like? How am I going to mentally process all of these things? Because Mercury retrograde is all about processing what we've experienced in the past. And so I won't go there too far, because we'll talk about that more.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Mars piece is really interesting. It's like, okay, what are we going to do about all of the things that we've processed, all of the limitations that we've had, and the commitments that we've grappled with over the past 2.5 years? How are we going to handle all of these things?
Yeah, because it won't make its conjunction again until Capricorn, and we start up this whole cycle. So it's almost like the last aspect that Mars, it is last classical aspect that Mars will make to Saturn before it moves. So it's kind of the one of the last times our actions are basically lining up with this big picture discipline in a sense. So I think that there's a great importance to this, and the fact that it's happening during Mercury retrograde is really going to help kind of congeal everything that's happened into this bigger picture, because it's Sagittarius time. That's what we're focused on. We're focused on what's above and looking down, rather than the specifics of it. So yeah. So okay. So let's talk about some of these tarot cards. Well, before I talk about the tarot cards, let's talk about the moon real quick. Let me divert. Because I think that plays in a lot this week. And so when we have the Mars sextile Saturn aspect, exactly, it's actually the moon's going to be at 0 degrees Leo. But as Shawna and I have said in previous episodes, aspects happen at an exact time, but that doesn't mean that's when the things happen. When it's applying itself, as it's making its way towards there, and especially when it's in that within 1 degree, that's when we're going to feel it really activated in our lives. It doesn't stop there, but a lot of times that's when you're going to feel the most pressure around something. So I find it interesting, Shawna, that essentially as it's applying itself, the moon is going to be in Cancer. Which is going to trigger a square to Mars. It's basically going to oppose Pluto and then form a T-square with Mars and Uranus before moving into Leo. So I think there is really, there's really an emotional element to this transit to me, since the moon is going to be in that sensitive sign of Cancer where we feel our emotions all too much. But we can hopefully use them to our advantage as well. So what do you think about that before we go into the tarot cards? Because I think they tie in a little.
Yeah, no, I think that's important because the moon is that emotional tone. So this is the thing is, yes, Cancer, the moon in Cancer is more subjective. It's more about the feelings. We're not necessarily thinking in a technical way. We're more about feeling the nuances of our inner world. And so, yeah, I wonder if the moon making contact with like opposing Pluto and then making that the square with Uranus and Mars, we may feel a little bit intense. We may feel like a lot of possibly like little triggers of anger or resentment, or just being like agitated in general, like annoyed.
Yeah.
And maybe not even necessarily, like it might be very subtle. I don't know. It might be overt. But that being said, though, the moon is waning, and when it's in Cancer, it's not necessarily like, it's not like it's a last quarter moon or anything like that. It's like basically like a waning gibbous moon. And so I don't know. I think we may be like where the trigger comes up, whatever it is, there's an intense feeling, and then we feel it, and then it washes over us in a certain way. And so the fact that that's happening leading up to this Mars and Saturn aspect, I wonder if there may be a feeling that triggers us into action in some way.
Yes. And that's the thing. I like that, the feeling washing over you. Like it doesn't have to be like any type of detrimental feeling in one way, but the feeling is going to challenge us because it's going to be in a T-square. But that doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's just something that we have to work through. And so I guess I just say this, because, Monday or Tuesday, especially Tuesday, we might feel a little sensitive. So just FYI, when those things come up, be aware of your emotions. Yes, just be aware of your emotions and be aware of your actions. Because, Mars sextile Saturn, Mars anything, it wants to act, but there's a lot of things here right now that are like trying to temper our actions in some way. Not so we don't make actions, just so that we are making them from, the right place type of situation. So let's talk about these tarot cards and why I talked about that to begin with. So for Mars sextile Saturn, I drew the daughter or page of cups as the focus, and the father or king of wands as the grounding. And that daughter of cups really spoke to me as far as the Cancer moon is concerned in my mind. So I really think there's like an element around just being really tender right now around our long-term goals and trying to, we're kind of struggling to stay grounded in the plans that we have in some way. Or perhaps, or perhaps we're like a little bit emotional, during early midweek, but we still have to be dynamic in some way. And so sometimes, when emotions come up, it kind of takes away, depending on who you are. Some people get a little too dynamic when emotions come up. But Cancer energy is more likely to retreat a little bit. So I'm wondering if we might need to be, we might have to just move through some emotions so we can still be dynamic in some way, and like work through that weakness to, just build strength and self-knowledge basically around, these big picture things that we're going for and all the actions we're taking, and aligning our discipline with. So Shawna, what do you think about those two together?
Yeah, it does remind me of these elements of having almost like a childlike hopefulness. And I like the word that you use, tender. It is like we have maybe this hope or this feeling or this thing that we're doing, and it feels just, a little tender, a little vulnerable. And that is the Daughter of Cups. But then the Father of Wands is strong. It's like there's a sense of authority, a sense of ambition, a sense of passion there. And so it feels like, how can we blend these two together? How can we retain that youthful inspiration and then channel that into a healthy way?
I like that. Because it's true, emotions are not a bad thing. They give us emotions come up to give us a lot of things in life that we need, like, hope and just aligning ourselves with some type of, heart-centered emotion here. And what's interesting is, like, a lot of times the Daughter of Cups can have to do with going with your gut around something. So I'm wondering if, any type of, challenging opportunity comes up, especially since we're talking about the moon is squaring Mars and Uranus, and things can come up when those types of aspects happen. So I'm just wondering if maybe we need to just kind of pay attention to our own gut right now, about midweek, and see what comes up for us, and get creative in the pursuit of our goals, and this opportunity to take action in some way. So yeah, I would stay in tune with your emotions the best that you can. And if you have some type of nagging feeling or something around what it is you're doing, I would honor that. So.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely. Don't ignore the emotions.
Yes.
They don't have to rule every single thing that you do, but, pay attention, notice. Exactly.
Okay. So some questions to take away for Mars, in sextile aspect to Saturn. I'd ask myself, how much energy do I put into my goals and visions? Do I make the applied effort necessary for the opportunity to succeed? I would ask myself, how can I honor my emotional self while still acting in a dynamic way? Can I work through any perceived weakness to bring greater strength and self-knowledge? And then lastly, I would ask, if any delays come my way, can I use the time to stay focused on my purpose and act responsibly with the big picture in mind?
Nice.
You need to act responsibly when Saturn's involved. All right, so let's move on to our next set of aspects here involving our friend Mercury retrograde. So we have Mercury, perfect. Mercury, who is retrograde in Sagittarius, and is moving back over a conjunction with Saturn, a sextile with Mars, and is also going to trine Uranus, and what we are titling, I Need a Moment. So some exacts on that. We have Mercury, who's going to conjunct Saturn on Wednesday, December 6th at 4:05 a.m. Pacific time, which is 12:05 p.m. Universal time and 10:05 p.m. Aussie Eastern time. And that conjunction will happen at 28 degrees Sagittarius. Then Mercury is going to sextile Mars, and that will be on Wednesday the 6th as well at 7:58 a.m. Pacific time, which is 3:58 p.m. Universal time, and Thursday the 7th at 1:58 a.m. Aussie Eastern time. And that will happen at 28 degrees Sagittarius and Libra. And then last, but certainly not least, we have Mercury, who will trine Uranus. And that will happen a little later on Sunday, December 10th at 1:30 a.m. Pacific time, which is 9:30 a.m. Universal time and 7:30 p.m. Aussie Eastern time. And that trine will happen at 24 degrees Sagittarius and Aries. So Shawna, kick us in with your next quote.
So this is, again, by Marie Forleo. Proactively bring passion to everything you touch, to everything you do. No matter what task is in front of you, bring as much enthusiasm and energy to it as you possibly can. Bring your full attention, your full presence, and the godlike quality that each of us has within to every task in your day. And so I thought this was really perfect for this pile up of aspects that we have with Mercury, because this is about bringing focus to things. And so Mercury is our intellectual focus. It's our mind, and it's what our awareness is focused on. And when we have Mercury making all of these different aspects to all these planets and in retrograde, it's so important that we do bring our full attention, that we don't just check out mentally when things get difficult or when things don't go the right way. And I think that because of this, we can actually reap a lot of rewards, and we can have like this element of kismet even that can happen during this week if we do focus intensely and bring lots of passion to what it is that we're working on.
Yes, because we have Mercury in a fire sign, so there's definitely some passion related there and some fire that's kicked up. I love it, Shawna, because I really think that this aspect, or all these aspects, and just this Mercury retrograde in general, especially being at the end of the year, is really allowing us to go over this crazy year. We are now processing. It's almost like processing all the retrogrades at the same time. In a sense, like we did our processing earlier on in the year. I think what we were talking about, April, somewhere around there, we had that first. And then in late August, early September. And now we're having our third of the year. And I think that this is really because in a Sagittarian way, it's really encompassing the big picture and looking at everything that we've gone through. And so I find it intriguing, Shawna, that these cluster of aspects basically happen, around the same time, but in reality, they have already happened. So we talked about last week about how to stay aware when Mercury is about to go retrograde to the things that come up, because a lot of times those things that come up are coming up for some type of reconsideration within. And so I'm wondering, for the sheer fact that we are immediately triggering all these transits again, if those little things and insights and considerations that popped up last week are now being re-triggered for us to now process them. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And it's always important to notice. So, and for our listeners, when you say that, Mel, when it means that these transits have already happened, it's because, to use the example of Mercury conjuncting Saturn. So Mercury is moving along in Sagittarius, and it's going, from like 25 degrees, 26, 27, 28, and then it conjuncted Saturn, and it moved forward and it kept going, but then it stationed retrograde and started to move back. And so it's conjuncting again, this time moving backwards. So last week we had all of these aspects when Mercury was moving forward, and now we're experiencing them again while it's moving backward. And I think you're right. I think that we may get a new awareness, or maybe either new information, or possibly where we're like, wait, like that isn't whatever information we received last week or whatever we were thinking, we're like, oh, that's not what I expected, or that's not what I thought it was, or that's not what I want. there's more information to be had, and these aspects will happen again when Mercury stations direct and starts to move forward. So it's like, it makes me think of the saying, third time's the charm.
Yeah.
So,
right.
So like, we're not at that third time just yet. This is the second pass. And so I think it ties back to what you were saying earlier with the previous segment, Mel, is it's like we are taking actions and we're doing things and we're getting new information. And at the same time, there is still more information to be had. So I do get the sense that we're processing a lot, and maybe we're processing all that's happened this past year as well.
Yes, I completely think that, because I mean, it seems so lined up perfectly to facilitate these things, especially since it's at the beginning of the retrograde. It really gives us a lot of content to chew on over the next 3 weeks or so, and it won't be until early January that we are going to revisit these points. So just be aware of that. And and it's interesting, Shawna, because the first two aspects happen together. The conjunction to Mars and the the conjunction to Saturn and then the sextile to Mars that Mercury retrograde is having, which ties into our Mars sextile to Saturn, the previous segment. This is all talking together. And once again, that the moon is in Cancer, and we're experiencing this T-square, and it's almost a loose grand cross with Pluto. So basically, all the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, are kind of being activated in this tense kind of standstill, because that's the thing with a cross. A lot of times it can kind of stop the energy from moving, which I find perfect for the title of this segment, which is I need a moment. I need a moment to process all these things that are really happening and going on in my life, and all these new mental considerations that are popping up for me to look at if I allow myself to. Because that's the thing, is like, if we're not as aware and we're not going in to take that moment, then we could be out there creating all these moments that we don't want to create in the long run, because we are working essentially with a debilitated Mercury, because Mercury is in Sagittarius, which it's in detriment there. It doesn't work as well there. And it's retrograde. It's getting near the sun, so it's combust. So our thinking and processing right now is not in the best of places to be especially to be actively pursuing things, or it's really an inner process, I think, that's going on right now to work through. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of that is showing that this is a time where we may tend to gloss over the details. Because I don't, so this is the thing. Okay. So it depends on what's happening in our lives. Mercury in the sign of Sagittarius is all about the big picture. It's about, like really novel and exciting and big ideas, but it kind of sucks at like getting down into the nitty gritty and creating like a formal action plan. So not such a great time for that, unfortunately. The thing with this is, I would say it's good to watch out for situations where we may be overly optimistic and to be like, it'll all work out. Like, I would say, like, don't necessarily do that. Like, really do your darndest to get the details that you need. Don't assume that everything is going to work out. Ask the questions that you need to ask. Be diligent with that. And also use this time to look at the bigger picture of your life too. Like, use that Sagittarius energy to say, okay, like, what's my long-term goals? Where am I going? Is what I'm doing right now a good fit for that? Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe I need to redo things a little bit differently. I think that's a good way to use this Sagittarius energy, as long as we're doing as much as we can to be more critical where necessary.
Yeah. And I think that's where Saturn is coming in and saying, okay, well, let's look at this. And well, it's so interesting too, because, we have Mercury in Sagittarius. When a planet is in Sagittarius, that means it's what is called disposed by another planet. And that's the planet that rules Sagittarius, which is Jupiter. So Mercury is doing its retrograde dance, contacting all these planets, but it's kind of filtering its function through Jupiter, who's currently in Scorpio. So I feel that's another kind of notch in the we're going over all these changes and all these kind of scorpionic transitions and shifts that we've had, especially this year, and especially as Jupiter has moved into Scorpio, because I feel like the second it went into Scorpio, things have been changing, literally changing, because that's Scorpio, a lot. So there is a part of this Mercury retrograde that, in my mind at least, is really tied up with Jupiter in Scorpio as well, and how we are processing our own growth within these kind of challenging realms that ask us to make transition in life and move on to better, greener pastures, and using our power correctly in order to get us into this growth, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think, it's like a part of this process of processing what we've experienced and rethinking things and revisioning. We do have to draw on that Jupiter in Scorpio energy. And so a lot of that means, like a lot of the sex scandal situations that have come out, it's like, okay, uprooting and, digging up and exposing the wounds and the traumas, and kind of airing things out and saying, okay, like what are the things that I have hidden down that are that I've hidden down because it wasn't appropriate or it was too traumatic to talk about them at the time, but now I can talk about it. That seems like that might be a part of this process as well, or that we may need to do that in order to focus on the bigger picture as well. We may need to go there in order to move forward.
Yes, I completely agree with that, and I think that is a solid a solid observation, especially with Mercury retrograde and sextile to Mars. So part of me is thinking that we might be running back over previous actions in our mind, like things that have happened to us, what we've done out there, and what we've basically been asserting ourselves towards, or how life has asserted itself on us. I feel like we're going to be processing those types of things, and from that kind of serious Saturn lens. And sometimes Scorpio stuff, Jupiter in Scorpio, it can bring up unearth painful things. So I think that this retrograde is incredibly fruitful, not easy, but incredibly fruitful is kind of what I'm thinking in the long run. So, and just to recap the information we gave last week. So we entered the shadow period of Mercury on November 14th. Then it stationed retrograde on the 2nd or the 3rd, depending on where you are of December. And then it's going to station direct on the 22nd and 23rd of December. And then it will leave the shadow January 10th. So this is kind of the time frame that we are talking about right now, where we're going to have, even though we're having these specific transits are exact now, they're kind of setting up the mental picture, at least I think in my own mind, for this time period that we're going to be processing through early January.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's re-examine, revisit, rethink, reprocess, or process if you haven't yet. Some people haven't even gotten to the yet. But that's essentially what Mercury is here for us to help re-examine the things that have taken place in our lives, just from a mental standpoint. it just helps us to change our own perception of things in the big picture. So we kind of talked about Mars and Saturn in the mix, like early on in the week on Wednesday. So our previous segment and what we're just talking about here now is all happening, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of the week. But then we have this trine with Uranus that is later on at the tail end on Sunday. So Shawna, how do you think Uranus might kind of come back in with this retrograde?
Yeah, so I think earlier in the week we're going to be feeling that that more like focused, intense Saturn Mars kind of energy, where we're like, I'm gonna do the things, and we're just like feeling like all forceful, possibly.
Yeah.
Like really, like nose to the grindstone. And then when that lets up, and then we move towards the trine with Uranus over the weekend, I'm thinking we may feel more like exploring different possibilities, different options. We may get some new information that we didn't know existed, or maybe maybe earlier in the week we put out our feelers and we do the things that we need to do, that we put in the effort, so to speak. And then over the weekend, it's like, oh, okay, then we get the feedback on that in some way. And that may be literal, like you ask for something and then you get the response, the answer about it. Or you just put in a lot of effort earlier in the week, and then later in the week, you get some new information about something different. I don't know. But it definitely feels like earlier in the week, we're more focused and driven. And then later in the week, it's more of a time of exploration and being open and kind of, and also because of the transit that we'll talk about.
Yeah, next one.
it does feel like more of an exhale, or like sitting back and being like, okay, I did all the things, and now I can, now I can take that moment.
Yes. Right. Yeah. No, that's good. I love that. That's perfect. Yeah. Cause new ways of looking at things can come up, especially this weekend, I think. So, how can we get ourselves out of our comfort zone enough too? Cause, we're in Sagittarius right now. So Sagittarius energy is always pushing us to go beyond, to greater things. And so we have to open up to any type of insight we have right now to kind of get us out of out of certain comfort zones and into some new areas of life, or at least considering them. Because it's Mercury retrograde, might not be acting on it, but we are considering a lot of new possibilities that we can then act on, as the new year starts. So yeah, let's talk about these tarot cards here, because I couldn't have picked the most perfect. It was like the most perfect combination. It's the Daughter or Page of Swords, which is back again. She was here last week as the focus. And then the Hanged Man as the grounding. And it's so literal for Mercury retrograde. To me, it's really about aligning our perceptions with new perspectives. New info basically coming in to chew over, and taking a little time out for ourselves, just like our title, like needing a moment to basically suspend ourselves towards some honest, truthful insights. And through that process, maybe we can let go of certain things that we are mentally holding on to by gaining new perspective. So Shawna, what do you think about these two cards together?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it is a perfect combo. So the Daughter of Swords is like, reminds me of this person that has all of these exciting ideas and like, yes, then wants to move forward. And there is a certain element of similar to the Daughter of Cups, where there's a certain sense of childlike innocence, or like there's a lot of hope and a lot of like excitement. But then the Hanged Man is like, okay, let's hang out for a second. Like let's wait, let's chill out, and let's just take that moment and see, how, like, let's wait before we actually take charge and do all of these things. I don't think that means like don't take action, but I think it means like, okay, simmer down a little bit.
Simmer down now.
Yeah.
Simmer down. Oh, I like that, Shawna, because it's true. Maybe that's kind of part of the thing, especially with Mercury and Sagittarius. Maybe we have like 5 million ideas that are on the plate, and it's time to take a minute, and suspend any action in order to really go over those things and gain as much insight and perspective that we possibly can on these notions, so that we go forward with the right one, that's meant for us. Because that's the thing. We can't do it all. Lesson learned personally. And the thing is too, just a quick little note about the Daughter of Swords, with Swords energy, there can be conflict, a sword is basically a device to defend. And a lot of times we defend something with our thoughts and our words and our own minds. So I'm wondering if maybe it's a time to kind of, to release defending something to some extent, so that we can, release it or sacrifice it in some way, but for the greater good, by letting certain things go, and we don't defend an idea that we've had any longer, we can then formulate new ideas around, certain issues that we might be struggling with, or release any type of spite or judgment that we might have. Because that's the thing too with the Daughter of Swords is, it's this mental energy that's quick to judge. It's quick to place, some type of something on something, it's like it jumps to a conclusion. So I'm wondering if this is an opportunity for us to release our own defenses around the ideas that we have, especially ones that we're hell bent on carrying out. Maybe it's no, that's not. Stop, literally beating a dead horse. And I guess that's Sagittarius. Anyway.
Don't beat that horse.
Don't beat that horse. I'll beat on you. No. So yeah, I guess it's the last thing I would say about those particular cards together.
Nice.
Yeah. So some questions. So this was a doozy. I would ask myself, now that Mercury is retrograde, what areas of my life are signaling beliefs that need re-examining? Do I need a time out to process? I would ask myself, have past actions been running through my mind? What honest insight can I gain by re-examining what has shaped this year? And then lastly, I would ask, are unusual yet innovative solutions to these considerations popping up? What thoughts and perceptions are pushing me out of my comfort zone? Is it time to let go to a new perspective?
Nice.
All right, Shawna, so let's talk about our last pair of transits here. We have Venus, who is going to be squaring Neptune, and we also have our last quarter moon in Virgo, and what we're titling Conflicting Values. So some exacts on that. Venus will square Neptune on Sunday, December 10th at 5:48 a.m. Pacific time, which is 1:48 p.m. Universal time and 11:48 p.m. Aussie Eastern time. And that's going to happen at 11 degrees Sagittarius and Pisces. And then we're going to have that last quarter moon, which will happen on Saturday, December 9th at 11:51 p.m. Pacific time, which is Sunday the 10th at 7:51 a.m. Universal time, and then 5:51 p.m. Aussie Eastern time. And that's going to happen at 18 degrees Virgo. So Shawna, kick us in with your last quote.
So this last one is also by Marie Forleo. Remember, having faith means recognizing the value of what you are here to contribute to the world and allowing your actions to be grounded in that truth. So I liked this particularly for this combo of aspects because Neptune, it really reminds us that there is something that we're here for. We may not always know exactly what it is, but there's something that we have that's a higher purpose. And there's something that each of us has that's a higher purpose. And Marie Forleo, this is something that that she promotes a lot in her work, that each of us is unique and special, and that we all have something to bring, something very creative to bring. And this Venus-Neptune aspect is really, Venus is about beauty and love and harmony, and Neptune is about that kind of ambiguous, sometimes spiritual, sometimes a little bit murky component. But when these two come together, there's a lot of creative potential. And sometimes we don't always know exactly where that is going to lead us, but it's still important that we pursue it.
Yes. And we really don't know where that leads us, because that's the whole thing with Neptune is it's not very apparent. It's not, it is something as nebulous as a higher purpose. You can't really, you can put your finger on that the best you know how, but it's not necessarily something you can have or touch or hold. Like there is no certainty around such things with Neptune, but it's more of like an intuitive faculty. So whatever comes up during this time, we're dealing with. We're dealing with Venus, who's all about, relationships and how we socially put ourselves out there and what we open up to and are receptive to in this world, which, like Shawna put the title of conflicting values, and that makes a lot of sense because we open up to certain things and then we in turn value them. So I'm wondering if, because Venus is now in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is all about the big picture and opening up to, expansion beyond what it is that we have known. So I'm wondering if we're kind of getting tested in a sense, because it's a square. It's not, it's action oriented and it's challenging, but it's a different type of challenge because it's not so apparent because of the energy. So I'm wondering if we're being kind of challenged with new purpose within the expansion of our own relationships, and how we are, what we are opening up to in this world. So what do you think about that, Shawna?
Yeah. It's an ambiguous question.
I know. What do you think about all that? I guess what I'm saying, the question I'm putting around is how Venus is now in Sagittarius and essentially is opening up to relationship dynamics that consider the bigger picture or consider, like I feel like part of this aspect will question our own ideals around relationships, our own vision, our own higher purpose within the relationships that we are in. And if those are lining up with lining up with how we are growing in life, and those kind of bigger picture considerations, I guess was that even, I don't even know if that.
No. Yeah. So I think the thing is when Venus is in the sign of Sagittarius, we are thinking, we are excited about love and life and new ideas and new things. And when Venus comes into this square with Neptune, it is it's almost like I wonder if we're reminded of what our ideal relationships are like. What is what is it that we really want in a relationship, and the non-practical vision that we have of how our relationship should be. And this is romantic and otherwise, romantic, platonic, business partners, all of those things, even people that we don't get along with sometimes, and so I wonder if we're confronted in some way with how, what is our ideal? Does it meet our standards? Does it meet our expectations? Does it meet what it is that we're experiencing? And, maybe because Venus is in this this kind of pileup of Sagittarius energy, do we want to think about that? Does that work for us? Are we craving something else, something different? This reminds me of a conversation that I was having with a friend this week where she's had an intense few years or so where she's been really focused on family. And so she hasn't been in a relationship, and she's finding herself as she's getting more into dating again, she's like, wow, I want totally different things. And my ideal relationship is very different because of what she's experienced over the last few years. And so I wonder if we may be feeling that, if we may be craving more of that ideal, more of that deep connection, especially because it's Neptune. And we may not necessarily know what it is that we want, but we want something, we want something different. I don't know.
What do we want?
Yeah.
And that's the whole purpose of Mercury retrograde. To be honest, to segue back real quick, is that we're processing these things. We don't have to know. And because this Venus square is also happening in the last square of the cycle to Neptune, we're wrapping things up. And this is also the last quarter moon, last square to the sun. We're wrapping things up. This is an internal process that we're going to be going through for the most part. And I actually think it's pretty beautiful, Shawna, like you were saying, we're having the Sagittarius pileup. But what that's meaning with all these planets in Sagittarius, including Venus, like I was saying earlier, it is then disposed of by Jupiter in Scorpio. And Jupiter is pretty much in an exact trine with Neptune in Pisces. So I feel like, Jupiter is really ramping up and flowing with our ideals and the things that we are looking for in life, growing towards this, utopian vision in a sense, like it's supporting it almost. So what do you think about that? Like, once again, Jupiter's influence in these transits and how it kind of, related to our growth in some way.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a positive element of support. But at the same time, this is a square of Venus.
I know.
So I'm this is the thing, is anytime Venus and Neptune are in aspect with one another, especially when it's what's known as a more difficult aspect, like an opposition or a square in this case, we may idealize people. We may see people as so amazing when really maybe they got some flaws that we're not focused on or that we're ignoring. And so, or situations, but in this case, I think it's more relational, more relationship or socializing kind of situations where I would want us to be cautious about really using discernment that leads into our moon, but like being very cautious of how it is that we view people and the opportunities, the energy that we give to people, being very cautious and not getting swept away in the ideal.
Yeah. Well, and I like that, Shawna, because I was looking at this position because we have the square at 11 degrees Sagittarius and Pisces. And if you do recall from the week earlier, we had our full moon at 11 degrees Gemini. So that previous full moon is kind of throwing in a T-square, a belated, like, ghostly T-square into this square with Venus and Neptune. So I'm wondering if there are certain things that maybe kind of come up during the full moon that we are now almost like re-triggering the processing of the perception around those things, especially with all these Mercury retrograde transits. And so yeah, I mean, this could trigger some type of, once again, inner processing, because that's the thing. And maybe we should bring in the last quarter moon at this time and we'll discuss that and why we're like inner process, because it's about, the crisis in consciousness and those internal tensions. So Shawna, what do you think about this last quarter, tension in a sense, and the fact that it's in Virgo?
Yeah. So last quarter moon, totally like that inner crisis, so to speak, where it's like, what am I doing? What do I want? And that can be subtle or that can be more overt. It depends on where you have Virgo energy in your chart, I think. But Virgo in general, this last quarter moon in Virgo, it is more critical, more discerning, like, all right, I want things to be a certain way. And if they're not, I might get a little peeved or I might try and control things. But at the same, so I think that this makes an interesting blend because I feel like this combination is maybe where we want things to be a certain way. We want that certain ideal, and it's like, okay, are we going like, how much control do we have over what it is that we want? And where do we need to like let things just be? Where can we take action? But where do we need to just accept the fact that maybe something doesn't meet our ideal and we need to, let that be or move on or let go? It reminds me of the Serenity Prayer.
Yes. Which we have featured in previous episodes. You want to reiterate it, Shawna?
Yeah, I might butcher it. It's the Serenity Prayer is, Dear God, please give me the
strength.
Give me the strength to change the things that I can, the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, and the discernment to know the difference between the two. I think that's close.
Paraphrase.
Yeah.
You get the point. You get the point.
Damn it.
And I totally agree with you 100% on what you're saying. Because that's kind of the last quarter trigger. I feel like all these specifics come up and we might see things, reality. Because that's the thing with Virgo. Virgo's like, what's real? What's practical, real of the earth? Let's dive deep into this, especially all the details. So I'm wondering if we kind of get like a little bit of a reality wake up call in some way, or if maybe we are holding on, like once again, the devil's in the details. If we are so detailed about our, idealistic vision that we can't let, certain things come into our lives, because we've got it all mapped out and this is how I want it to go. And anything, that's not that, I can't accept or, get down with. So I'm wondering if, because there is always that kind of uncertainty and fogginess of Neptune. And here we have that moon that just really wants to put its finger on a detail. I'm wondering if that's kind of where we wrestle with is the fact that we might not be able to. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And just that we may not know too. Things are murky with Neptune involved.
Yeah, that's the thing is like confusion may set in, we might be confused around certain relationships and where their direction is right now. And things may be in a flux and we're just trying to process them the best way we know how. And essentially we have to like relax and, just process internally rather than externally right now, so that we can move through these things without being a detriment to ourselves. Like, especially with all this Mercury energy and the fact that this last quarter moon in Virgo is also ruled by Mercury. So Mercury is tapping into this last quarter moon. And Mercury was also tapping into that full moon that I was just talking about earlier. And it's triggering these same points. So a lot of this to me is really wrapped up also once again in that processing of the mercurial processing of these aspects of our lives.
Definitely.
So I, to leave you with something right there, I would avoid making any major decisions right now. This is like an internal processing that, you don't take the inner to the outer right now. Let it process. And also, just word to the wise, I would stay away from any type of spending or going out there and getting crazy money wise. Cause Venus also kind of ties into those types of things. Yeah.
And so quick side note about that. I totally agree. I think it's not a time to make big commitments or big decisions and that kind of thing. At the same time, some of us have to do that. Yeah. So it's, and I know for myself personally, I have some things that I need to decide on and I need to commit to. And so what I'm doing for myself is I'm asking as many questions as possible and I'm getting as much information as possible. And also keeping in mind that whatever I decide now, it may not be permanent, and that's okay. And like going into it knowing that I may need to shift some things around, and that's not the end of the world, and like kind of like making peace with that up front, so to speak.
I like that, especially making peace with it, because I mean, that's kind of part of it, too. Because there's been a lot of aspects that have not necessarily been promoting peace in the last how many weeks. We've once again been put through a lot of ringers. It seems like a lot of people have. So, yeah, you might have to. This is the thing, is we constantly have to make decisions. It's like we don't get a day off from like choosing to do things in our life necessarily. But like you're saying, Shawna, we can be decisive in certain ways now, but just know that, decisions that we're making, chances are they can definitely change. These are the types of conditions that things can change. So just be aware of that. And like, ultimately, I think everything's kind of changing to the better. Regardless of what's going on. And I know that is, that's really a perception thing to wrap your mind around. But I guess let's segue into the tarot cards, because I think that's kind of what's driving my, what's the word I'm looking for? Mercury. It's getting me today. You fill in the blank. Okay. So what I drew was the Empress as the focus and the World as the grounding. And, these are two wonderful cards as far as tarot is concerned. So I'm wondering if part of these transits have to do with like really nurturing some type of inner harmony or wholeness within ourselves. Because the Empress brings growth. There's always like a reassurance of growth in our lives, no matter what we choose. That's the thing. Is like, even if we're, having that Mars sextile Saturn issue, Mars in Libra being like, oh, I don't know how to decide, to go all the way back to that transit. Just know that if you have to make those decisions, much like Shawna was just saying, like sometimes you don't have a choice. But just know that, whatever you do choose, ultimately it's going to be in your favor for growth, I think. So Shawna, what do you think about these two cards together?
Yeah, they are very encouraging. And I love the Empress is such a beautiful card. It is a card of growth and abundance and fertility and like just like beauty too. So it's like, okay, yeah, like what's growing in our lives and where are we flourishing? And it's encouragement that there is something that will flourish. There is something that is that's ready to grow. And then the World is like, okay, yeah, like this is important. This is a meaningful contribution into our lives, into the world, literally. And so whatever it is that is growing in our lives and whatever it is that like where we're getting traction, that feels important. So whatever element or aspect of our lives where things are working and flowing, it feels important to move into that because there's more there. There's more to come.
Yes, there is. And say things aren't flowing. Maybe you're on the other things and you're like, nothing's growing here. What's happening?
You're like, WTF, guys?
Yeah. What do you mean? Because that's the thing too, is that the world is about, that fulfillment, that wholeness. But it's also about a completion and culmination in some way. And so I'm wondering if there's a certain aspect that some of us out there might need to, leave certain, inappropriate habits behind so that we can grow into greater abundance, so that we can end like an old cycle of being in a way, so that we can embrace growth and you just, newness in our life, because a lot of times we get stuck in patterns that don't allow us to have to bring in this just the fertile energy that's available right now, especially with all these planets being disposed by Jupiter. Jupiter is kind of tapping into both the World and the Empress. It's this like bigger thing. So I'm wondering if, like, for some of us, maybe an old cycle might be ending that is really flourishing the growth, or the fact, because the world has to do with travel and the path that we've been on. So I'm wondering if if there's like a potential for like greater creativity, and once again that personal growth through the understanding of the road that we've already traveled in some way. because we're doing all this reprocessing. So I'm wondering if that will help us kind of tap into those things. Because I don't know, when the world comes up, there's a part of life that's, reaching a natural conclusion of some sort. So what are we nurturing to completion or fulfillment in some way, is what I would kind of ask here. So
nice. I like that. Beautiful cards.
They are. They truly are, like figuratively and, the art.
Yeah.
So let's wrap this up with a few reflection questions to take away with this Venus square Neptune and the last quarter moon in Virgo. I would say during this impressionable time where relations seem to be in flux, can I take a moment when propelled to make any decisions? Can I honor the fact that this might just be a moment of confusion? I would ask, with the moon in her crisis of consciousness position, can I focus on the internal process rather than an external manifestation? What is my soul discerning? Can I stray from the need for details for the time being? And then lastly, I would ask, how can I nurture harmony and wholeness in my life when I'm confronted with conflicting values? Is a part of my life reaching a natural conclusion in order for true growth to surface?
Nice.
So these are some questions to ask. This is a hell of a week, Shawna. There's a lot going on, I have to say. So, what have we learned? Well, we've learned that Mars in Libra will sextile Saturn in Sagittarius, and it's really asking us to take a look at our applied effort and what we are putting our energy into. And that's really tying in as well to Mercury, who's now retrograde, making its conjunction with Saturn, sextiling Mars as well, and trine Uranus. And it's really telling us that we might need a moment to take some time to process certain things that have happened in our lives, and especially this whole year. And then lastly, we learned that Venus is square Neptune, and we have a last quarter moon in Virgo, and things might not be as they appear, or we are processing through to a higher purpose, especially relating to our values and relationships. And we are going to have a moment where we have to externally internally deal with some tensions that may arise. So Shawna, I know you have an excellent action item for our peeps, so please share.
I do. So this is a two-parter. So number one, I looked up the Serenity Prayer and so that I can share it with you appropriately. So I want us to write this down and then to post it somewhere, either at like a workspace or in the bedroom or the bathroom mirror, something like that, because it's good advice throughout the whole week. So you can, of course, Google it, but I'll share it with you now. So it goes, Dear God or Goddess or whatever deity you like to use, please grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. So that is, I will be saying that to myself this week. So write that down, post it somewhere where you can see it, just like a little reminder. And then the other piece of this is I want everyone to Google on the YouTube Marie Forleo Super Soul Sunday. And there's a really cool talk, it's like 3-minute little video that she did on Oprah's Super Soul Sunday. It's called The Belief That Can Make You Unstoppable. And I think it's really appropriate for this week. So if you just Google in the YouTube or whatever Google site you use, Maria Forleo Super Soul Sunday. And I'll put a link to that in the action item section too.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Well, it sounds, I love that you brought the Serenity Prayer back in, because the last line, the wisdom to know the difference, right? Is that essentially what it is? And we are, once again, like you said, we have a stockpile of planets in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is about wisdom. So this is essentially what, to wrap that up real quick, I think you brought something in at the end that really kind of exemplifies a whole week, and that is tapping into our own wisdom around the situations. So I love that, Shawna. Great action item. And if anybody's out there doing that, comment, tag, let us know, because we'd love to see what you're doing.
Yeah. We always love interacting with you guys. And so that being said, another way to get involved, of course, is to become a patron of this podcast to show your appreciation and to get those super cool show notes. You can do that at feminineprinciplepodcast.podbean.com, or you can find out more on our Facebook and Instagram pages under Feminine Principle Podcast.
Yes, we'd love to have you as a patron, and you get the Astro Basics cheat sheet too. So there's all types of fun things, and Shawna and I are always coming up with with new things as well. So yes, come on down. So coming on down. If you want to find us individually, you can find me at energeticprinciples.com. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Energetic Principles. And Shawna, so where can they find you?
You can find me on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram under Neo Feminine Astrology. And then you'll see too that I have my 2018 moon journal that is still available, and I'm super excited about that. So more information about that is there. It's a little guide for all of the new moon and the full moon cycles throughout the entire year. So yeah, I'm excited about that.
And wouldn't that be an excellent Xmas gift to give to someone, or a Kwanzaa gift, or a Hanukkah gift, or just a gift because a solstice gift. So yeah, go check out her Etsy because you can get it. You can get it in an actual form in a book, or you can even get it digitally too. So yeah, check that out. And just as a quick reminder, we do have that Facebook Live replay on our page on Facebook. If you want to go check out, that full moon antics, maybe it'll give you some triggers to this week and how it might play out. So you never know. So yeah, Shawna, any last words for our listeners?
Sending lots of love and asking that if you enjoy this podcast, let a friend know, spread the love. And we want to say thank you to everyone who has given us the 5-star ratings and reviews on iTunes. Those are super sweet, and we love seeing those, but it also helps us get the word out about the podcast as well. And then lastly, also make sure that you are subscribed if you're not already to get future episodes the moment that they are published.
Yes, and they are published on midnight on Sundays Pacific time. So, sign up and I think it just downloads. But yes, I second that. Thank you so much to everybody that has left us that 5-star review on iTunes, because it really does help people see us more. And a special shout out to Kiki Matoba, Annie French, and Star Pixie 2828 who left wonderful customer reviews. Customer reviews. We are so thankful for your gratitude, and everybody that reaches out and tells us about the podcast and how much it's making an effect on their lives in a positive way. Like, you couldn't really repay us anything beyond that. We're very grateful for that feedback.
Definitely.
So that being said, we thank you so much for tuning in, and we're wishing you a wonderful week. So until next time, may the stars be with you.
Namaste.